Did you know that the DNA of the Irish people is like a living time capsule, holding clues to some of the most fascinating chapters of human history? It's true. Despite being a small island on the edge of Europe, Ireland has a genetic story that's both ancient and unique. From its early settlers to its worldwide diaspora, Irish DNA has been shaped by isolation, invasion, and resilience. In this video, we're diving deep into why Irish DNA is so special. We'll explore ancient migrations, the influence of the Celts, the surprising impact of Viking and English invasions, and even the unique traits you might recognize in Irish descendants today. So, if you've ever wondered what makes Irish DNA stand out, stick around, this is going to be fascinating. Ireland's genetic story begins over 10,000 years ago, during the Mesolithic period, when the first humans arrived on the island. These early settlers were hunter-gatherers who likely migrated from what is now Britain and mainland Europe after the last ice age. Their DNA is still detectable in modern Irish people, albeit in small amounts, offering us a glimpse into a time when humans were just beginning to establish themselves in Ireland. Then came the Neolithic farmers, around 4000 BC, who revolutionized life on the island. These people brought agriculture, pottery, and, most importantly, their genes. Recent studies show that this farming population had Middle Eastern ancestry, tracing their roots to regions like modern-day Turkey and Syria. What's fascinating is that these Neolithic settlers left a more significant genetic impact on Ireland than the earlier hunter-gatherers, contributing to traits still found in Irish populations today. But the real genetic foundation of modern Ireland took shape during the Bronze Age, around 2500 BC. This period saw the arrival of people from the Pontic Steppe, modern-day Russia and Ukraine. They introduced not only new technologies like metalworking but also a major genetic shift. These Bronze Age newcomers are believed to have brought the genes that would later give Ireland its iconic red hair and fair skin. Ireland's isolation as an island meant that many of these ancient genetic markers were preserved far better than on the mainland. This ancient DNA forms the bedrock of what we now consider distinctly Irish genetics. When you think of Irish culture, the Celts are probably the first thing that comes to mind. But who were they, and what role did they play in shaping Irish DNA? The Celts were a group of Iron Age tribes who spread across much of Europe between 1200 and 400 BC. Around 500 BC, some of these tribes arrived in Ireland, bringing with them their language, customs, and, of course, their genes. The Celts introduced Gaelic, which remains a cornerstone of Irish identity today. But their genetic impact is just as profound. DNA studies suggest that the Celts didn't so much replace the earlier populations in Ireland as they blended with them. This fusion of Bronze Age and Celtic ancestry created the genetic blueprint for modern Irish people. One of the most interesting aspects of the Celtic legacy is how deeply their influence was preserved in Ireland compared to other parts of Europe. While Roman invasions diluted Celtic culture and genetics in places like France and Spain, Ireland remained untouched by Roman rule. This allowed Celtic traditions and genetic markers to survive relatively intact. There's also evidence that Celtic migration wasn't a one-way street. Genetic links between Ireland and regions like Galicia in northern Spain suggest a two-way exchange. This connection has fueled theories about ancient maritime networks and even inspired cultural myths, like the idea that the Irish are descended from the Milesians, legendary warriors from Iberia. Even today, when people of Irish descent take DNA tests, they often find traces of this ancient Celtic heritage. It's a legacy that goes beyond genetics, shaping not just who the Irish are, but how they see themselves. Now let's talk about a group of people who brought both chaos and change to Ireland, the Vikings. These Norse invaders arrived on Irish shores in the 8th century, and while they're often remembered for their violent raids, their genetic legacy is surprisingly subtle but significant. The Vikings didn't just plunder, they settled. Cities like Dublin, Wexford, and Waterford were established as Viking trading hubs, and with settlement came intermarriage. Modern DNA studies have identified traces of Scandinavian ancestry in people from these regions, though it's not as widespread as you might think. What's fascinating is how the Viking genes blended into the existing Irish population. For example, the Vikings brought certain genetic markers linked to height, which may explain why some Irish populations are slightly taller than their Celtic counterparts. They also introduced genes that contributed to the diversity of hair and eye colors in Ireland. Culturally, the Vikings left a lasting imprint too. The Norse-Irish communities that emerged from these interactions were instrumental in shaping medieval Ireland. Dublin, in particular, became a melting pot of cultures, combining Irish, Viking, and even Anglo-Saxon influences. While the Vikings eventually assimilated into Irish society, their genetic and cultural contributions remain a fascinating layer of Ireland's complex history. Ireland's genetic story took another turn with the arrival of the Normans in the 12th century and the English in the centuries that followed. These invasions introduced new genetic markers, especially in eastern parts of the island where intermarriage was more common. The Normans, who were originally of Viking descent themselves, brought advanced agricultural practices and feudal systems that reshaped Irish society. Genetically, their influence can be seen in certain regions, particularly around Dublin and the Pale, the area of English control. Later, during the English Tudor and Stuart periods, large-scale plantations of English and Scottish settlers introduced even more genetic diversity. This period also deepened the divide between native Irish populations and those of Anglo-Irish descent, a division that still resonates in Ireland's political and cultural landscape today. One of the most fascinating aspects of Irish DNA is the unique genetic traits that stand out among Irish people and their descendants. Let's start with a feature that the world often associates with Ireland: red hair. Ireland has one of the highest percentages of red-haired individuals in the world, with about 10% of the population having red hair and up to 30% carrying the gene for it. This trait is linked to a specific variant of the MC1R gene, which is more common in populations of Celtic origin. But red hair isn't the only unique trait. Studies have shown that Irish people also have higher frequencies of genes associated with fair skin. This likely evolved as an adaptation to Ireland's cloudy, low-sunlight climate, allowing for greater vitamin D synthesis. Combined, these features contribute to what many recognize as the Irish look. Interestingly, Irish DNA also carries clues to certain health conditions. For example, people of Irish descent are more likely to have genetic predispositions to celiac disease and hemochromatosis, a condition that causes the body to absorb too much iron. This doesn't mean everyone with Irish ancestry will develop these conditions, but the genetic markers are more common in the Irish population than in others. What's equally intriguing is the genetic diversity within Ireland itself. Different regions of the island have subtle genetic differences. A study by Trinity College Dublin found that people in the west of Ireland, such as in counties Galway and Clare, have distinct genetic signatures compared to those in the east. This reflects the island's historical divisions and the varied influences over time. These traits, red hair, fair skin, and even certain health-related genes, don't just make Irish DNA unique, they tell a story of adaptation and survival in a specific environment. They're a reminder that our genes are not just markers of who we are, but also where we've come from. Ireland's geographic isolation has played a huge role in preserving the distinctiveness of its DNA. Unlike mainland Europe, where populations frequently intermingled due to wars, trade, and migration, Ireland's status as an island created a natural barrier that limited outside genetic influences for centuries. This isolation allowed Ireland to maintain a more homogeneous gene pool, especially in rural areas. For example, genetic studies have shown that many Irish people can trace their ancestry back to specific regions of Ireland with remarkable accuracy. This is because, historically, Irish communities were relatively insular, with little movement between regions. However, this isolation also had its downsides. Limited genetic mixing meant that certain hereditary conditions became more common. For instance, Ireland has a higher prevalence of cystic fibrosis compared to other European populations, a result of genetic bottlenecks in the population's history. At the same time, this isolation allowed Ireland to retain many of the genetic markers from its ancient populations. While other parts of Europe were influenced by waves of migration, Ireland's DNA remained closer to that of its early inhabitants. This is part of what makes Irish DNA so valuable to researchers studying ancient human migrations and the history of Europe. In modern times, genetic isolation has decreased as globalization and immigration have introduced new genetic diversity into the Irish population. But the legacy of Ireland's isolation is still visible in the distinct genetic makeup of its people, a snapshot of an ancient and enduring heritage. One of the most remarkable aspects of Irish DNA is how far it has traveled. Over the centuries, millions of Irish people have immigrated, spreading their genes and their culture to every corner of the globe. Today, it's estimated that over 70 million people worldwide claim Irish ancestry, far exceeding Ireland's population of just over 5 million. The largest waves of immigration occurred during the Great Famine of the 1840s, when millions of Irish people fled to countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. These immigrants carried with them their genetic heritage, which can now be traced through modern DNA testing. In fact, DNA tests often reveal Irish ancestry in surprising places, from Argentina to South Africa. What's fascinating is how the diaspora has kept Irish genetic markers alive. For example, many African Americans with Irish ancestry can trace their roots back to the 18th and 19th centuries, when Irish immigrants and African Americans lived and worked side by side in cities like New Orleans. In the United States, Irish ancestry is so prevalent that it's considered one of the most common ethnic backgrounds. This global spread of Irish DNA has helped connect the Irish diaspora to their roots, with many people discovering their Irish heritage through tools like ancestry databases and genetic testing kits. But the diaspora isn't just about genetics, it's about identity. The spread of Irish DNA has ensured that Irish culture, traditions, and history remain vibrant and celebrated worldwide. From St. Patrick's Day parades in New York to Irish festivals in Sydney, the global Irish community continues to thrive, united by a shared genetic and cultural bond. Recent advances in DNA technology have uncovered some surprising insights into Irish genetics. For one, studies have revealed unexpected connections between the Irish and ancient populations from regions like Iberia and Scandinavia. This has led researchers to propose that Ireland was part of a much larger prehistoric trade and migration network than previously thought. One of the most exciting discoveries is the genetic diversity within Ireland itself. While Irish people are often thought of as a single genetic group, modern research has shown that there are subtle but significant differences between regions. For example, people from Ulster in the north have genetic markers that are distinct from those in Munster in the south. This reflects centuries of localized intermarriage and the influence of different historical events, like the Ulster plantation. Another fascinating finding is the role of Irish DNA in shaping modern populations. Researchers studying the genomes of people in places like Britain and the United States have found significant traces of Irish ancestry, even in individuals who didn't know they had Irish roots. Perhaps most intriguingly, Irish DNA has helped scientists study ancient diseases and human evolution. By analyzing the genomes of ancient Irish remains, researchers have gained insights into how human populations adapted to challenges like climate change and disease over thousands of years. These discoveries are a testament to how much our DNA can teach us, not just about where we come from, but about the shared history of all humankind. So, there you have it. The story of Irish DNA is as rich and complex as the history of Ireland itself. From ancient settlers and Celtic warriors to Viking invaders and global immigrants, every chapter has left its mark on the Irish genetic code. If you've enjoyed this journey through the unique DNA of Ireland, let us know in the comments. Have you taken a DNA test and discovered some Irish roots? Or maybe you've always wondered about the origins of your family's red hair or green eyes. Share your stories, we'd love to hear them. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and slang go foil. Goodbye for now.